Howdy.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Hugo Girl with a very special episode of The Terror by Dan Simmons.
Woo.
This is not technically science fiction, but Dan Simmons is a science fiction writer, among other types of content.
And who are you?
Oh, yes. I am Haley.
I'm Lori.
I'm Amy.
We are together, Hugo Girl.
That's right.
By our powers combined.
Do we have any... I feel like it's been forever since I've DM'd. Do we have any new reviews? I think we do.
We have so many things. I'm going to try to talk fast, which is a superpower of mine. First, I'm going to say hi to our nice friend Damo, who lives in Ireland.
Hi, Damo.
Yeah, I met him, internet met him in the science fiction book club on Facebook, which is sometimes a terrible place, but also
I had
sometimes
to leave.
a nice place. And Damo's a nice part of it. And he has been listening to our back catalog and leaving us lots of nice comments. And he's just been a very nice listener.
Every single one. I look forward to it.
Oh, me too. Always a nice comment. And then sometimes I go back and listen to the episode because he comments on something. And I'm like, I have no memory of that. So I go back and listen. So it's been fun. So hi, Damo, and thank you so much for listening. Also, coincidentally, a new Apple Podcast review from Ireland might be our friend Damo. I don't know.
Maybe it's Francis Crozier.
Maybe it is. User
Francis Rod and Moira Crozier.
Oh my gosh, he of the many names. So our new review from Apple Podcasts from an Irish reviewer is from Ballybow or Ballybow or Ballybuff because English is a crazy language. I'm going to go with Ballybow too. Yeah. And I just pulled an excerpt. And that reviewer says, some great analysis of sci-fi classics. You may agree or disagree, but you will come away thinking because they really know their stuff.
Aw.
Thank you.
People don't always agree with us.
I mean, we don't always agree with us.
That's true.
So then we got a review from Meowsen. And A+ pun on the title of the review, "You keep going, girls."
I welcome any and all puns.
And it says, listening is like attending a spirited book club with friends minus the mimosas.
Sometimes we have drinks.
Yeah, you can have. I have a chilada right now. Haley has a
hard
seltzer. Amy has a
Yeah, I'm
hard
having a
seltzer.
Sometimes we have champagne when we get nominated for major awards.
And you can have a mimosa if you want to. You can do whatever you want.
We encourage it. Have a mimosa.
Pour a glass of water. Hydration is important. And then also, Amy's friend Kyle said,
Oh, Kyle.
y'all made me a better reader. Where can I put that so Lori will see it? Kyle, my friend, I saw it in our group chat. I saw it, and it made me so happy.
That's all it takes, y'all.
And then we also wanted to say hi to the Cyborg Book Club on Instagram, who shared our account. And we got lots of new followers and nice comments from that.
Yeah,
So
we
thank
did.
you very much for listening and for sharing.
Also, a brief shout out to my friend Alex, who I was with when I was with my friend Kyle, because they were two of our early adopters.
Aw.
Aw,
And we had a nice chat about how far the podcast has come and everything. And hi, guys. That's
hi
all.
guys. The last thing I wanted to mention was our fundraiser. So
Woo, 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 woo.
I'm sure most of our listeners have heard about the horrible draft opinion by Justice, if you can call him that, Alito,
Injustice.
overturning Roe v. Wade and basically everyone's right to privacy. The House of Cards is coming down. And Haley had the great idea to do this fundraiser where people could be entered into a drawing to pick a book that we're going to read and discuss on the podcast. And there's a couple more days for that as of this recording, but as of the time it's posted, it will be done.
Oh, yeah.
But as of right now, we're going through the end of May, and we're recording this on May 27th. We have surpassed $2,000.
It's amazing.
Yay!
And there's so many things that we might have to read.
So many.
And how are we going to pick? We don't know.
Well, yeah, we're going to, they're all,
Only one's going to win,
Guys.
Haley.
guys, I've got this under control. All of the donations are in a spreadsheet, and each person has numbers, so it's basically like they have a raffle ticket. So what we'll do is just do a random number generator,
Yeah.
and Google's random number generator will pick the number of the winner.
I just want to revisit briefly. Haley, did you think we were going to have to read something by everybody who...
No, I didn't. But
Okay.
So what I have to say on the subject of the random choice is that if you win and you wanted to pick a horse book, if you wanted to pick anything by Marguerite Henry, if you wanted to pick a Saddle Club book, interestingly, I realized through conversations with my friends that I don't care for British horse books. I'm not a Black Beauty person, but I'm a Black Stallion person. Saddle Club, Marguerite Henry.
Well, not being a Black Beauty person, being a Black Stallion person sounds a little misogynist, Lori.
Yeah.
What?
Wasn't Black Beauty a beautiful mare?
I don't know. I didn't read
some
it.
sort of man?
I also wouldn't
sort of
read
man
National
horse?
Velvet, and I wouldn't watch National Velvet even when it was on TV. I don't know why. Also, maybe we'll edit that out because we have so many British listeners, so I don't want to be like, I hate your horses.
Nah, I think it's fine.
Fuck your horses.
Black Beauty, thumbs
Fuck your
down.
horses.
They're daft.
But you have to do this.
No
Oh. Horses.
No horses of the monarchy. Okay, that's everything.
Cool.
I didn't do that fast. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's important stuff. We got a community to address.
Do we want to tell people about the Hugo packet?
Oh, yeah. Voting open today. Goes through August 11th. Is that right?
I think so. Like sometime in August.
That sounds right.
Yeah,
Because
I
the
think
awards
it's
are in-
August 11th.
Yeah.
If you want a supporting membership, they are $50. A supporting membership enables you to vote for your favorite podcast and also your favorite novel and novella and novelette and short story and artist and fanzine and a host of other things. And it comes with the voter packet, which has a ton of media in it. Like you get free books.
Yeah.
and
No, it's
stuff.
worth it.
Yeah, like for $50, you would get a ton of reading material.
Yeah, that's the selling point for sure.
And listening material.
And listening material, which is, all of our listening material is already free. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is probably the strongest way that you could support us in the coming months. So
yeah.
cool.
Give us your vote.
All right. So for June, this special episode, we go to see with The Terror by Dan Simmons, published in 2007. It has not won any awards. This is a book about the famed Franklin expedition, but I wanted to bring up that he wrote another book in a snowy place called The Abominable in 2013, and that recounts a mid-1920s attempt on Mount Everest by 5 climbers, 2 British, 1 French, 1 Sherpa, and 1 American, the narrator, to recover the body of a cousin of one of the British characters. I imagine there's a monster, an abominable monster, and I imagine that there's all types of misogyny in it, but...
I read 2 pages of that book and then sent it straight back to the library.
Which is saying a lot, because we have now read The Terror a combined 6 times between us. So.
This book is 740 pages.
I think it's, my version was like 900, so...
Oh, wow.
I guess I had the thin paper. I don't know.
Yeah, so I started on my hardback that I read it originally, but then I bought the ebook because I wanted to do word counts of certain words. So it was totally worth the $10. So, all right, let's briefly plot summarize this, and I'm going to say this, although I think most of our fans know that like there will be spoilers. All right, The Terror is a fictional / horror account of the famed and doomed Franklin expedition.
Can I say about spoilers too?
Yeah.
I think in many cases it's fine to listen and to the spoilers because like you'll probably forget. But for this book, I think that the tension is so important to enjoying the book that if you haven't read it, I would recommend skipping this until you've read it.
And it's a deeply troubling book in many ways, but it's a very fun book.
Yes.
So that aside. All right. Details the famed and doomed Franklin expedition that set out to plot a course through the Northwest Passage through like North Canada. 2 ships, the HMS Terror and the HMS Erebus, left England on May 19th, 1845, with a crew of 24 officers and 110 men. Whalers last sighted them off of Greenland. So the ships are stocked with food for 5 years and are heavily reinforced, super heavy oak, and there's metal plating. They have they're 2 of the first ships to have steam propellers to get them through the ice when things get rough. However, after wintering over and getting stuck in the ice in the winter of 1845, the unthinkable happens. Summer just never comes for the next 3 years. Also, a sledge team, after killing an Inuit man, releases a mystical demon called a Tunbach, which takes the form of a giant, horrible polar bear. The man's daughter, one of only 2 female characters in the book, is referred to as Lady Silence and takes shelter in the ship. There are a ton of characters in this book, but the main character, I'd argue, is Francis Crozier. After Sir John Franklin dies, the leader of the expedition, the men face death from multiple horrific angles. The Tunbach, the cold, scurvy, and malnutrition in the form of tainted canned goods. This was one of the first sailing expeditions that used canned goods. Before this, it was all salt pork, hardtack, that kind of thing. After 3 years in this hellish environment with just living on a boat with, the the smell of farts from 100 men in every boat. And like none of them bathe ever. I just cannot imagine how badly it smelled. The men finally decide to abandon the ships and take to the ice, hauling boats filled with supplies as they hope to reach the open water or the back river to reach a settlement. After a mutiny and lots of cannibalism, the ranks are thinned. At the end, only Crozier is left alive, being rescued by Lady Silence. She teaches him how to survive in the Arctic, and they become lovers as he assimilates into her culture, and that is where the book ends.
And you could really stop reading, like...
Oh, yeah, when they all die, just stop.
Like after you think Crozier has been killed, you could just
That's
stop.
a good spot.
It's a good spot to end it, yeah.
Although you don't get to hear the fate of Hickey if you stop there.
I think it's worth it just to know that he would eventually die. I mean, no one was going to survive this.
You just don't have to read the weird romance between Crozier and Lady Silence, which we'll get to, but...
Yeah.
You really need to stop when DeVoe and those guys go south.
And you can just hope that everything turns out okay. You can be like, well, and they found open water.
Maybe they're fine. It's kind of like in that version of the last Harry Potter book when they're like, and Hedwig was fine and just flew away. All right.
Our men do not make it.
No. Well, and I think this book has me for years now, like since 2018, I think. This book just has had me enthralled. It's a fascinating thought experiment. It's just to put yourself in the mindset of living in I get sad in Atlanta's winter and there's still trees and I can still go to the store. Like, I just can't imagine the claustrophobia that was these men's lives.
Really tried to sit with this. We can talk about this during general discussion.
True. But yeah, let's get into goodies from Goodreads. There's a lot, and Lori was screaming last night because if you sort by 1 star on Goodreads, there's just people did not like this book. As
it's fair. It's fair. The criticism is fair.
Yeah. So it was a little bit less fun than it usually is because sometimes there's just absurd things, but everything that people were saying, I was like, yeah, I mean, it's very long. Yes, it's very racist. Yes, it's very misogynist. I agree. But so I tried to mix it up and I found some interesting, thoughtful criticisms and also appreciations on the 3-star reviews, but I also found a funny one from Amazon, from Yurik on Amazon. I had to fight my way through hundreds of pages of lists of the dead, lists of the living, lists of various supply inventories, lists of other details dense enough to bog the entire story down and get similar to the manner in which Erebus, the flagship in the novel, sunk in the pack ice. I felt like I was reading those parts of the Bible that detail who begat whom for pages on end. 100 pages could easily have been removed from the terror, resulting in a far superior story. And then Melissa on Goodreads... This is just one sentence and a long one. She generally liked it, but my favorite part was she posted a picture of an iceberg and was like, people, just turn around and go home.
I think I saw that one.
And I was like, I mean, she ain't wrong.
And that was suggested.
Yeah. Crozier was like, we have to get the fuck out. And then they didn't. Cool. What do y'all got? I got another one, but I'll let y'all go.
Yeah, I have a couple. I found 2 pretty good ones on Goodreads. I just want to read this one line from one of the 1-star reviews on Goodreads. This one's from Clucking Bell.
Clucking Bell.
and it just says, I've been trying to come up with a way to turn an internalized primal scream of boredom into a substantive review and failing.
Oh, it's so funny because every list I was just like, oh man, the supplies are dwindling. I'm so nervous. I loved every single list.
I liked this one. This is by Todd A. Gipstein. It's from Amazon. It got 1 star out of 5. His title of his review is Endless and Tedious. But this one taught me something. This is just 2 parts from a longer review, but he says, I found it curious that Dan Simmons dedicated this book to the cast and crew of the classic 50s sci-fi thriller The Thing. And then he said later, I would recommend renting The Thing, not the Carpenter remake of the 80s, but the original, and spend a cozy and creepy hour and a half watching it if you want a real and well-crafted polar thriller. Indeed, you could watch many, many movies, or perhaps read several books in the time it would take you to make your way through the terror. Aptly named.
That's completely valid because I got the audiobook at one point, and it's 28 hours long.
Holy shit.
I mean, this book is so much longer than I remembered it being.
Right.
Yeah, it was definitely longer this time because I think, yeah.
I was acutely aware of the lists, too. I was like, Crozier, I know who's dead. I saw all of them die, and I didn't forget. And I don't need you to tell me. But it's funny because they are historical figures, if some person on the street if Billy Eichner was like, for $1, how did John Torrington die? I'd be like, consumption. How did young Stoker on the Erebus die?
Private Heather had a TBI and they kept him alive.
Oh, like a pet, they said.
They screwed a gold sovereign into his head
I know, but he wasn't
to
right.
keep his brains in.
Oh my God.
They sledged that man on the ice for hundreds of miles, too.
I sure did.
Okay, I've got two. The first one is from Vacay on Goodreads. The pacing is absolutely whack. Massive time skips occur for seemingly no reason, and before you say, the writer just wanted to skip the boring stuff, he clearly didn't, because half this book is boring stuff.
He wanted to skip to the boring stuff.
I give it all to me.
And then the other one, I like all of it, but the last sentence is my favorite. Danielle Palmer on Goodreads says,
Yes. I have this one too.
I quit reading when the age of a ship was compared to the age of the fuzz around Noah's dongle, which was then followed up with a description of a teenage female native they found out in the snow and examined along with the severely injured man she arrived with. I'm not sure why a basic health exam would necessitate checking her nether regions for virginity. As this was all happening before I was even a dozen pages in, I decided this wasn't the book for me. And my favorite line, seems to be a man's book.
Men's adventure fiction.
That was the one that had me burst out laughing and text you guys last night. Seems to be a man's book. Mm-hmm. Also, I propose that as a title option.
A man's book.
The Terror seems to be a man's book.
Seems to be a man's book.
Yeah, my old roommate and good friend Jenny had watched the show, and I convinced her to read this because she is an English professor and she has time now. The semester's over. And she sent me a picture of it and she started it. And a couple minutes later, she was like, I like The Terror so far. It's a little racist. I mean, the characters are like, it's super off-putting. And I was like, yeah. It is. Yeah. It's really good, but yeah, it's very problematic.
This book is our problematic fave. Absolutely our problematic fave.
Everyone I've ever made read this book, now counts between 6 and 7, likes it. But and I think reading it the first time, you're just like aghast at like this horrible, mind-blowingly awful situation these people found themselves in. The second time, especially when you read it with your Hugo girl weather eye, you're like, alarms start going off.
Right.
Well, and I think the first time around, it's interesting to read some of the like lengthy explanations he gives for some of the historical context stuff.
Yeah. Because you don't know it. Yeah.
Right. And then the second time you're around, you're like, I don't think these guys would have a conversation like this.
No.
where they recap to one another everything they just went through.
Yeah, it made me think of how we talked about and read reviews about Dragonflight, where they plan what they're going to do, they talk about what they're going to do, then they do it, then they talk about what they just did.
It's a 5th grade essay. Yeah.
There was a lot of that. But I think that where Dan Simmons really shines is building suspense. And so this book is full of it. And I talked about that with Hyperion too. And then I've read like 2/3 of his book, Summer of Night, that also is similar. And I think, Amy, you've got your Peak Dan Simmons theme you wanted to talk about, and it sort of goes with that. But so for me, reading this the second time really hit differently because I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So instead of being like embroiled in the page turning, I knew it was going to happen. So I still liked it, but I definitely liked it less and overlooked those things far less than I did the first time when I was just like, oh my God, this bear, what's going to happen? Is there going to be any food?
I think that's exactly right. Because when you don't have to anticipate anything, you can stay kind of in the moment in this book. And when you're in the moment, you're like, do we need to talk about the Goldner's Tins one more time? Or could we just?
Or the 15-year-old's pubic hair.
Yeah.
The escutcheon,
the escutcheon,
which is a word I had to look up.
The vertical dark slash of... I mean, so much of this...
The raven's wing.
So much of this conversation it's going to be hard because so much of it goes into misogynist moment, like almost all the discussion probably could be.
I know, we're going to have to...
So some of my questions, I think, we kind of got into it so far for the general discussion is like, how this book hits differently. I mean, I think... So I like the dryness of this book. I downloaded a PDF of like a man who tried... So there was like 20 different 20 different rescue attempts to find like what happened like over like the course of the 19th century. But I found like an old PDF that was published in like 1850 or something.
Oh, cool.
So, and I was just like, and I controlled F because it was like 500 pages long. And it was like, a crappy old PDF with like, it was just a scandal book. And it was just like, I was looking for like biscuits and rum and just like little totems to be like, oh yeah, this is exactly the same as, but I mean, if nothing else, this man did so much research for this book.
Well, yes,
and
we know.
He certainly told us all about it.
He could not keep any of it out of the book.
Yeah. For example, did you know about the naturalist, Charles Darwin?
The HMS Beagle?
In fact, well, now I do, because we got a 5 to 10 page essay, depending on the link of your page, on the HMS Beagle.
Has anyone in the room heard the story of the sinking of the whale ship Essex? Does it ring a bell?
Yeah. Oh, so this actually is one. So this was my Peak Dan thing. I was going to say, which of Dan's insufferable Peak Dan moments was your favorite? Was it when he gave us the 10-page essay on Darwin? Was it when he talked about the Fox sisters and made sure that he reviewed them with a male gaze? Was it when the experienced sailors were explaining sailing to one another? Was it the whale ship Essex? Was it the minute description of native custom? Like, which part was your favorite?
So this is hard for me because I don't notice the Danisms, like, because I love it all so much. Like, when y'all talked about the Darwin thing, I was like, I don't even remember that. I was like, oh, like he like talked about it.
You don't remember it happening, or you just
No, I mean,
it
I
being
remember
awkward?
reading about Darwin. I think it was interesting, but like, I didn't find it as cumbersome properly as y'all did, because I eat up every line of this book.
I think it's just the way they talk about it, because it's like these two men theoretically spent 5 years on the boat together with Darwin and on the HMS Beagle, right? But then the way they talk to each other about it is like, do you remember Darwin from that boat we were on for 5 years? And the other one's like, yes, I do. I recall that he was. And then he goes to like the description about him. And it's like, these guys would know it.
It makes me think of like what Doctor Who was originally, like a children's educational show where you have the doctor and the companion, and the doctor explains things to the companion, so it teaches the audience. So you had it's Mr. Bridgers and Mr. Pegler having this conversation, and Bridgers is like, do you remember Darwin? And then Pegler's like, the young naturalist? It's so silly. It's so silly. And the thing is, I really like the characters Bridgers and Pegler, so I would have enjoyed to spend more time with them as individuals rather than listening to them spit Wikipedia at each other about Darwin. Like, I didn't hate it, but I was like, why am I still, like, it was half of the chapter. I was like, why am I still reading about Darwin, guys? So
I also thought it was,
I was going to add to what you said about Peak Dan.
Mm-hmm.
I have my Dan Simmons checklist.
Oh, yes.
So it's lots of characters. Same
so
for
many.
Hyperion, same for Summer of Night. Shifting point of view, which is something I like. I think it keeps things interesting. Shifting time. So sometimes we're in right now. Sometimes we go back to John Franklin's journal. We're jumping around years sometimes. High suspense, which that scene I talked about when we read Hyperion, how the scene where Colonel Kassad is in the spaceship that's breaking apart and he's like running from the ousters, and it reminds me so much of Mr. Blanky swinging through the masts, and the Tunbach is after him. And then there's a weird monster that we don't really see.
Shrike, a Tunbach.
A Shrike, a Tunbach, and in Summer of Night, there's some evil that's stalking this group of little boys who are on summer vacation. And it's very similar. And there's a similar suspense scene where one of the little boys and his dog are being chased by basically an evil garbage truck. And then the last on my checklist is a very sexy young woman.
Yeah, you gotta
sexy
at
babies.
least one.
Gotta have some sexy babies.
Gotta have an overly sexualized adolescent. You gotta.
Yeah, I mean, I think he scores 100% on that test.
His choice about when to throw in the guys' chapters was odd to me, because I don't know why we don't get more of like Pegler and Bridger in the beginning.
Well, and
We don't get them until the end.
This is my question, and y'all know that I don't like disjointed narratives. Like, what is the purpose in this book of it's breaking it up? Like, why not tell it in order? Like, I think that would be like the ultimate suspense.
You mean like in time?
Yeah. Because like, I think it very rarely is done in a way that I appreciate, but I know that lots of people love it. But like, I was just wondering like what it served in this book to have it be told not chronologically. So
I like it because you meet John. You meet Crozier first, right?
Yeah, and it's like 1847.
So, and you start at the beginning of when like you really know things have gone bad and you know that Franklin is dead, and then you go back in time and you find out like. This is sort of the equivalent of like the voyage of the Titanic. Like you've got these amazing ships. They've got steam power. They've got a gajillion feet of all these layers of oak. They've got all these fresh, fancy canned goods. The men are going to be dining on like boeuf bourguignon and stuff for the first time since, like you said, just salt pork and hardtack. Yeah. So you see this like very grand buildup, but you know from the beginning that things have gone horribly awry. So I think it gives you something to look forward to and be interested in.
That makes sense.
Like, how did we get from this is the best equipped expedition with the most experienced leaders, although John Franklin, as we can tell from day one, is kind of a Michael Scott.
The man who ate his boots.
I have a thought about that. I I feel that it is not a criticism to have not eaten your fellow men.
Oh,
but
I agree.
they make so much fun of him for it, and I'm like, please give me the boots before I eat a person. But yeah, I think that's what it's doing. I think it's adding to the tension building.
No,
I think he actually does it your way too, Haley. I feel like this book is kind of 2.25 books in a way. It's like you get dropped in media res, and it's like sort of I bet you're wondering how I got in this situation, and then you go back and
how I met your mother,
right?
How I met your twin buck.
I was gonna say that.
But then when they leave the ship, no, I met your twin buck.
2.5 toon bucks.
3 men and a little toon buck.
The toon buckette. It's like The Bachelor.
Who will she keep? Who won't she keep?
Who will she bite off their tongue and then make music through breathing in her mouth?
Oh my god.
Throat singing. Yeah, so when they leave the boat though, it's your kind of book. It's all forward from there. So it's like, so we get
that's a good point.
And then at the end we get the weird romance.
It goes through like space time and
yeah, it becomes definitely a different weird novelette at the end.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So my thing with the lots of characters and shifting point of view, which is something that I like, and I think we've used Game of Thrones before as an example where that's pretty well executed because it's pretty evenly distributed. I thought it was strange that we don't get a Pegler chapter till over halfway through the book. We don't get we don't get a Hickey chapter till almost the end of the book, which makes some sense.
There is one other one I had forgotten, but there is one in the beginning of the book.
Oh, really?
I completely forgot about.
When he's caulking the seat of ease, maybe.
But we only get 2 of his chapters, like total.
Yeah,
which is very odd.
I guess because he's the villain, maybe that he doesn't want to like humanize him. I would like to get more into his mind, but
yeah, what's so funny is his chapters are great. I was like, I would love to read more about why this guy's insane because he's insane.
Yeah, he is almost a comically evil villain.
Rat-faced. Yeah. Well, that's my complaint within the TV show is I think he's too handsome. Like, he's like a good-looking man.
Is he not rat-faced Culker's mate, Cornelius Hickey? I
mean, he is, but like, he's just like, I mean, I guess because it's TV, you kind of want like attractive people. Yeah. So yeah.
I haven't watched the show.
Oh, the show is great. It's such a great way to like visualize things. Like, yeah.
I didn't care for the show, but I thought that one thing that the show did better than the book was Hickey, because at one point, if you haven't read it, and I hope you've read it, if you're listening, but if you haven't read it, at one point Hickey gets lashed, and I actually feel that Crozier unfairly lashed those men after the carnival went horribly awry. I mean, yeah, he didn't give them any rules, and then they went hog wild at their weird tent orgy out on the ice, and then he got mad at them because it went horribly awry, and he was offended, and he beat 3 people, and then I thought, you kind of fomented a lot of this discord. But anyway, I think Amy's making all these faces. I think that they were very disrespectful, but still 50 lashes for a disrespectful costume. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in the show, the scene where Hickey is lashed is just really graphic and vivid, and like the actor does a very good job of showing like the suffering, but like the refusal of this character to show the suffering. And Crozier comes off like, I think, looking very much like a clear villain in that scene on the show. And so I like that because I think it's good when you can somewhat empathize with the villain. Whereas in the book, I mean, he's just bad through and through. Like, you don't see anything that makes you, I mean, the lashing, like, I did feel sorry for him when it happened this time around, but you just don't see anything redeeming in him. He's not sympathetic at all. You don't get any backstory that makes you understand why he is the way he is. So he's almost like comically a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I mean, even if you don't like the show, and I guess it's not for everybody, but like, you get to see the boat and you get to see like the claustrophobic, like, you get to see the food, you get to see.
I watched the whole thing. I ate it up.
Yeah,
I enjoyed watching it. I didn't think it was great, but I still I watched every second of it eagerly.
I mean, like, it's not my favorite, but like, I think it's worth just to like just to see the ice is really cool, like the Syrinx, and like just to visualize it. I think it's worth watching at least 1 or 2 episodes. So
that's what, like, per usual, I have a hard time visualizing anything that I read. So it's like
it'll definitely help.
That's why for this time around when I was reading this book, because I realized periodically that I was imagining the scenes in this book as being lit, right? And so much of what happens in this book is in the dark, and I think it's really important to the tension in the book to keep that in mind. The levels of that ship are just dark. There's no sun. Like, everything is
Despite the Preston patent illuminators that are covered with snow.
Like, it's not going to be illuminating anything if there's a big snow hill on top of it. So, like,
Exactly.
I had to keep, like, pausing and, like, reframing the way I was viewing things because I kept wanting to put light in these scenes and there wasn't any.
There's still some. I mean, like, because the TV
they
show,
have literal lanterns and stuff.
Yeah, and, like, I mean,
the sun comes up all day long at some point. But
Yeah,
it's
for
like
sure.
not very long, and then even that's a weird kind of claustrophobia when there's no like the sun's unrelenting.
Yeah.
That's another
Oh yeah.
different kind of problem. Yeah.
Well, because they start getting sun blindness and it like fucks with their vision and their headaches and stuff. So.
The show does a good job of illustrating that, and they talk about how it's even when the sun is out, you don't see the sky. The sky is, blanketed with clouds.
Yeah.
Which is in itself its own claustrophobic thing. Like there's not much distinction between the whiteness of the snowy landscape and the whiteness and gray of the clouds.
And just seeing the Toonbach is great too. Like I was never scared.
Wondering, would that be good or bad?
No, I think it helped.
No.
Like I was just watching episode 5 before we came over, and like it's the blanket going through the rigging scene, and like when you finally see the Toonbach, you're like, holy shit, that's frightening. Because
interesting.
Yeah, I fall on the side of I prefer not to get a direct look at a monster. I think it's scarier when I don't quite know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
I need at least one glimpse so I can visualize. Otherwise, I'm like, it's just like a dark thing.
It makes me think of Blair Witch, because one of the things about Blair Witch that was so good was that they never showed you what was out there, right?
I guess for me, though, when it's 900 pages, like I just...
Tell me what you've been talking to me about for so long.
Yeah, I mean, like, and like, I'm not a terribly visual person, but like, rewatching some of the episodes this week, I was like, seeing that, I was like, oh, that's frightening. Like, because like, sometimes when I was reading this, I was just like, it's a big polar bear, and polar bears aren't the scariest looking things on Earth. Like, they're kind of cute.
Actually, they're very cute.
Yeah, but there's one scene when he's up in the rigging chasing, and it's just like, because you see like the scope of him on a mast is huge, and like, it's just... He's got like an evil face, like a scary polar bear.
It is hard to visualize how big the thing is. And part of that, I think, is because the men they never really get a good look at it. They're just like, it's fucking big. It's just like, it's like the biggest thing.
It moves quick.
It's hard to imagine it walking upright, and it's like twice as tall as a tall man. It is hard to picture.
Yeah.
But for me, that makes it scarier.
Part of me just keeps picturing Yorick Bjornsson from His Dark
he's
Materials.
too sweet. He's so smart.
I kept picturing the Coca-Cola polar bear from the Coca-Cola Museum, which is
Also not scary.
Do you remember when I went a few years ago and I put a video of it from the Coca-Cola Museum? Like it's a person in a polar bear suit, and I captioned it, "What rough beast slouches toward Bethlehem?" Because it was.
I don't remember.
It's dirty. And it sort of walks like the person inside is not super confident about walking in this like 12-foot tall bear suit. And I was just looking at it and I was like, oh no, Toonbach is loose in the Coca-Cola Museum and he's wearing a scarf.
This whole conversation makes me want to ask you guys this question. So we spend the whole book, and this Toonbach is hunting everybody, and we're not totally sure what it is. Like, it could still be like a huge polar bear. We don't really know.
Yeah, because like that's interesting because they're like, at
or
this
is it
point,
just a metaphor? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because at some point they're just like, we haven't explored all the Arctic. There could just be gigantic polar bears that are awful. So,
but then he makes it very literal at the end of the book, right?
He's not subtle.
It's not subtle. This thing is an embodied spirit that was created by the goddess of the air or something, and it's being controlled by these mystical Eskimo people, and then Crozier becomes one, and that's where we are, right? It becomes very literal at the end.
He's like a vengeance demon.
Yeah, it's a vengeance
It's
demon.
a vengeance demon.
Well, and the worst kind of vengeance, because like they could have just had the Toonbach just kill all the men one night, but like instead, like they make their death as slow, and he stalks them and kills other animals so they can't eat the animals. Like,
what do you guys think about the way he goes with this thing? Like, do you think it was a good move to go all literal with this thing, or should he have left it?
I mean, I think the last 100 pages that we all agree is very problematic. Like, at a certain point, I was looking at it, and I was having trouble reading it, because every sixth word is an Inuit word, and he's just using all these Inuit terms and Inuit pieces of culture that, like, and I was just like, why is this white man telling this story?
Yeah,
and it's not even a real... I think the Toonbach is also something he made up.
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
It's something that I thought about, and we talked about with American Gods, like, what does it mean when someone makes up a mythology for a culture that isn't their culture, and in particular is a marginalized culture? I don't know.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
he even in the book marginalizes fictional characters by killing them multiple times or mutilating them, or it's just. I mean, I can overlook a lot when I read, and I can suspend disbelief. And I know that these are 19th century English soldiers; they probably weren't nice men, but like that, the last 100 pages are just—it's ridiculous.
My thought on some of it is, I think Dan Simmons clearly wants the reader to not sympathize with the British men who,
For sure.
have these horrible thoughts and kill these native people. And yet he leans so hard into it that, I come away thinking, I know that you want me to look at John Franklin and be like, oh boy, he was a real racist. But at the same time, I'm like, and you let him go on for so long, and that was up to you.
There's just things in here he did not have to include.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's one good thing about the show is that there's a lot less of the racism
Yes.
and the misogyny. Like it's just it's so nice to not have the boob talk and like the repeated use of slurs. It was just because it was produced for a 2019 audience and not. Although this book, when my roommate was like, when she was like, this book is racist, I was like, yeah, it was written in the 90s. And then I was like, no, it was written in 2007.
Yeah,
like,
this is
come
not
on.
an old book.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite, I read the acknowledgments because I'm a big nerd. And the last part of the acknowledgments is him talking about all the Inuit references and sources that he got. And right after he lists them all, he says, my sincere thanks to Karen Simmons for finding and returning many of these later sources. He didn't even
Is that
do
his
his
wife?
Probably.
He just sent her out to go get that stuff, read a little bit about it, and then sent her back to return them.
And I bet he's one of those people that's like, well, I did the research. I can talk about it.
His wife probably did the research and then gave him the bullet points.
I wonder what his wife thinks about all the boob stuff. Maybe she loves it. Maybe she's like the model. I don't know.
His poor
know.
wife, she's like, oh, I'm 30.
He's going to find someone else.
My breasts don't bobble like they did when I was a teenager. Did you guys
Her
catch
nipples
that?
are uplifted now.
There are two instances of breasts bobbling.
Oh, yeah.
That's his favorite boob verb.
This has been partly because it's Dan Simmons and partly because it's a 900-page book. My boob talk section is like 6 paragraphs.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I can't wait till we get there. Kids.
Oops, all boob stuff. That's the name of this episode.
I wanted to say that the name James Fitzjames, even though it's a real person's name, was so funny to me. And I kept laughing about it. And then I was like, James Fitzjames is like if my name was Lori Bobori.
Or like Vineyard Vines. Like,
we spent so Haley
I still think about it.
Haley
sometimes.
and I were volunteering one time at a golf tournament. Not for the golf tournament. We were volunteering to raise money for a nonprofit. And like every person there was wearing a Vineyard Vines shirt. And Haley was like, what's another phrase like Vineyard Vines? And we just like
Forest 4.
Yeah, but like it has to be a real phrase because like it's a vineyard.
Right.
Vine. No.
we just kept trying to think of another phrase.
It's like a Zen koan. Like, what's the sound of one hand clapping? What's another?
What about a boatyard boat?
Oh, yeah, but that's cheating because it uses yard. That's too easy.
Boatyard is one word, isn't it?
Well, no,
Oh, is
but like
it two words?
vineyard and boatyard are like the same thing. So like that's too easy. That's like rhyming the same word twice in a rap song.
Too easy. You didn't think about it. You're just jealous.
All right. I would like to talk about. So, I was reading a lot about this book. Like I was basically like all day. I was just like, what can we talk about? There's so much to talk about. So Hickey being the ultimate baddie in this. Some people were talking about how they really doesn't appreciate that, like, because he was a queer and like, so the word sodomy or sodomite is used 14 times throughout this book. It's used a lot.
Sodomite.
I know, like, it's such an archaic term, but I guess in the 1840s it was more prominent. And like, this is a big problem, not a big problem. It was a big issue in the Navy. Like, it was like, you could get killed for being gay in the Navy in the 19th century. Like, it's wild.
This is Dan Simmons' sodomy book, like Herman Melville's sodomy book.
But
Herman Melville's sodomy book was classy.
yeah, I mean, Moby Dick compared to this book is just like a cold margarita on a hot day. It's just like nice. I don't know. So he's, although I wouldn't call him a queer villain. Like, he happens to be a sodomite or whatever, like, his that Franklin calls him, but like, it's not a part of his personality really.
So something that I
No.
thought about
It's a control thing.
you've got him, and then you've got Pegler and Bridgens.
Mm-hmm.
And where I saw a difference between them was that Pegler and Bridgens have this very virtuous policy that they leave their sodomy on dry land.
Oh, that was a big distinction. Yeah, when
and
you did it on the ship.
I thought,
So
like,
that's okay then.
yeah, and I thought there was some like weird respectability politics tangled up in there, and like there's a whole lot that other people, not me, could talk about with Hickey and Manson's relationship that is alarming for a number of reasons, and yet also you don't ever see Hickey be anything but kind to Manson, which is really surprising to me.
Yeah.
But like, I think that it is unreasonable to expect a normal human person to not indulge their consensual sexual activity when they're on a boat for 5 fucking years.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that. Like, these men, like, our men are just like, I mean, I hope they all had gay sex.
Yeah.
Like, please.
But like, so Hickey is the
What
one
else
who...
is there to do? Jesus.
Well, right, exactly. But Hickey does have sex, and he's the horrible villain. And then Pegler and Bridgens are like, well, we would never do it on ship. And I was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with that line that they've drawn between them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they did it out of self-preservation, because if they did it and got caught on ship, they could be killed, or like 100 lashes or
Yeah,
something.
totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's complicated, but it was just something that I noticed as a distinction between them as queer characters.
Yeah, and I think, being gay in the 19th century was very different from being gay now, and like, just it was not nearly the option that it is now. So.
Well, and like they knew about Pegler and Bridgens. Like,
Yeah,
people knew, but they were like, but they don't bring it here. They don't.
Yeah. They don't rub it in our
they don't
face.
push their lifestyle on us. So it was just weird.
Yeah.
I was amused by the difference in morality between homophobia and misogyny in this book, because like, so Lieutenant Irving catches Hickey and Manson in the Orlop deck or whatever they are, in whatever the phrase is, flagrante delicto or whatever. Yeah.
So cold. I hope
And,
they were snuggling.
And he has such a, I know it's so cold. What do you think they're little? So Irving has such a violent reaction to this. Like, he's just disgusted by this. But what we just learned about Irving right before he finds all this is that he led this woman on to believe that they were engaged so that he could have sex with her, and he left her behind, and she might even be pregnant, and he's never has any intention of ever going back to her again, and that's just fine.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know whether that was purposefully juxtaposed like that, but it was like...
Probably. Yeah.
I mean, if it was, then it was a good move, because I think it's one of Dan Simmons' more successful moments of being like, look how ridiculous and hypocritical this worldview is. But I was just like, oh, it's fine to completely screw over this poor woman, but I mean, don't you be having the butt sex.
The same thing happens today. I mean, people, were talking out of both sides of their mouth.
That's true.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Well, and similar to that, Crozier experiences all this discrimination because he's Irish, and yet he still thinks in his head of Native people as barely even human.
Animals.
Yeah. And I think, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but like, there's so much injustice in the world, especially in the past, I mean, not that there's not today, but like, you don't have to keep bringing it up, I guess. Like, I mean, how many times do we have to remember that 19th century Englishmen were racist? Like, we know.
Can we just talk about their boat?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so many parts of this that you could leave out. Add a footnote. Like, by the way, remember, these people were dehumanizing and horrible. Don't forget. But we don't have to, like, relive it constantly because, again, I was talking to my roommate, and she was like, if I was a POC and pick this book up, I would instantly put it back down. And I was like, I don't blame you. Yeah. I mean, the way that, even if it's archaic and it's meant to be reviled upon when you read it, it's like, it still hurts to read it. So.
Absolutely.
And it's so front-loaded. That stuff is, I was very surprised. Some of the first stuff you read is about Lady Silence.
Yeah, you can't ease into that. Like,
all that stuff.
That's where... not that I want to do
green
it.
Stockings when
green stockings.
A different Native woman that they objectify and dehumanize. Yeah,
I would not blame anybody for putting it down because you haven't gotten an opportunity to get interested in the narrative before that happens. So yeah, I don't blame anybody who's like, I think I'm skipping this.
Yeah,
one.
and not everybody has the privilege to be able to I can ignore this part.
Right.
So yeah,
I must have just glided right past all that the last time. I don't know what happened the last time I read it. I did not notice it, or I didn't even pause.
Yeah, I mean, I do think this podcast helps me read more critically in certain ways. Like,
did we make ourselves better readers?
Probably.
Hey.
I have a question. Why does Silence hang out on the boat after her father dies? Like, why don't she just leave?
Man, I wonder that too.
She says it's because she's waiting for Crozier, which if
Oh,
you
at the
read-
end, yeah. I don't believe
Yeah,
that.
so if you read the end, it's like she goes out on the ice with her father to find her husband, and it has to be somebody who has the same
The Shining.
The Shining.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
her father gets killed. She gets taken to the boat, and that's where she finds the guy with the Shining. It's Crozier. She knows that he has this thing, and so she sticks around.
I completely missed that.
Yeah, I
It's dumb.
forgot about it.
Yeah. Because
It's dumb.
Crozier's not like, I've seen the actual like Daguerreau type of Crozier, not a handsome man. I mean, also this is not real. Never mind.
Well, and because it's not real,
Yeah.
could Dan Simmons have made her 25 years old?
Yeah.
30 years old?
Even 18.
She could have been an old maid of a woman with the Shining at 30 years old, and she's like, all right, I guess
Not so bad.
I guess this old
You can have
sailor
it.
will do.
Yeah, I don't know why she has to be between 15 and 20. Why they have to. Oh, and plot hole. They establish she's Virgo and Tacta, and then Crozier's all shocked because Native women have sex all the time. And then later, when they're having sex in the igloo, he's like, "Oh, she's a virgin."
Yeah.
You already knew that, Crozier.
He'd had a rough 3 years.
Maybe it wasn't top of mind at the moment.
I was thinking,
Whatever.
because I was finishing it up last night, and like, so when he gets attacked at the end and she saves his life, he's basically like out cold for like 4 months. Just like in that igloo eating blubber.
Such a long time.
Such a long time.
And she's wiping his butt. She's doing all kinds of things.
Can we talk about how Crozier is completely obsessed with the one hand job that he got in a pond back in Australia?
Oh man,
This
I
reminds
love
me.
Sophia Craycroft and her platypus gambit.
Yeah.
man.
So
I'd like you to come to my pond. There's something I want to show you a platypus.
She would inspect this browser.
let me tell you. So this is an extra Goodreads review that I found. It was a 3-star review from this man who had gone through a really bad breakup, and this was like one of the only things that could like distract him from his horrible thoughts. The main character, such as it is Captain Crozier, whose defining traits are alcoholism and the lingering memory of a failed romance. This memory is told in one of the book's rare flashbacks to dry, warm land and includes an underwater hand job that is described in great detail.
The hand job it gets a whole chapter.
And so it wasn't his only sexual encounter, because he talks about
Yeah.
being with sex workers on like 4 continents. So like
Yes.
he's gotten laid, but like this hand job man.
But it was
put
the
a
most
number-
important because this wasn't a sex worker.
And she had an orgasm and he could not fucking believe it.
Oh, yes.
Blew his mind.
I have the quote. Certainly women, this is in my misogynist moment, but certainly women could not feel the kind of intensity that men do. Some of the doxies, word for sex worker, had moaned, but certainly that had only been because they knew the men liked it. It would have been obvious that they felt nothing. This reminds me of Descartes. His argument for why animals aren't like conscious creatures is because he thinks that like if you like hit an animal and it makes noise, it's like the equivalent of like a wheel squeaking.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
come on, why?
Well, what I want to know is I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, don't people like to hear their partner moaning because that indicates that they like it? So, like, why, under Crozier's moaning paradigm, his theory of moaning, wouldn't the men like it because they think it means that the woman likes it, therefore women can like it? Or he just thought men just like sounds?
I think he's so jaded that he just knows that sex workers get paid. Like, I think he's got such low sex self-esteem and has never, like, because if the vast majority of his encounters have been with people he pays, like, maybe he doesn't believe them. But that's sad. That's so sad.
Yeah, but like, why would he think they'd be going through that motion?
Like, what is there for the person to like about hearing the moan if they don't think it's an indication of the other person's pleasure?
I mean, I think,
Like, it's making you feel like the greatest lover in the world,
Yeah.
right? When
Well, I think
someone
he
is
thinks
making
he's-
these noises.
I think he thinks he's really smart and like seeing through women. Like, I think he really kind of probably hates them, but doesn't trust women.
I liked him so much the first time I read this just because I was so focused on the cold and the scurvy. And this time around, I was like, why couldn't Mr. Good Sir have gotten the girl?
Oh, Mr. Good Sir.
We haven't talked about
Poor
Mr. Good Sir,
Good Sir.
but Mr. Good Sir is a king.
He's a king. He's the only one that sees a naked woman and thinks to himself, not look at her globule breast. It is, well, that makes sense. That's sensible.
Yeah, and he's the only one that's like, hey, we should treat this injured Inuit man instead of like, a lot of the officers were like, don't bring him on board.
John Franklin was like, he can't come on my boat. What will happen to your boat? Someone new will fart in it?
Yeah. Ugh.
He
Sir.
is dutifully taking care of all of these men with scurvy. He could not be nicer to all the people.
He wasn't even a surgeon. He learned on the job so much when the other 3 surgeons die.
He has weird capitalization things.
Dr. Goodsir, he's my favorite kind of character, where he's kind of mediocre and he does absolutely the best that he can with what he has and rises to the occasion, and I just love him.
The man who plays him on the show is so sweet, too. Sweet.
He is my favorite part of the show. I love him. I got to the end of the book and I was like, why couldn't Mr. Goodsir have... First of all, could she have been 25? And could Mr. Goodsir have been the hero who survived at the end?
Oh, he was so good.
But his end is so good, though.
Oh, it's so good. He's like, I'm going to take my own life and you can't eat me.
Amy, can I tell you what happens in the show? It's a little different.
Okay.
You can say no.
It's okay.
Okay. If you're going to watch the show, you haven't seen it, skip like a minute. Amy. So, you know how he poisons himself in the book? Well, in the show, he poisons himself, but Crozier is still captive, and they're pretty sure that Hickey is going to force Crozier to eat some of Mr. Goodsir, and he's like, don't eat the bottom of my feet. The bottom of my feet will, or he says, eat the bottom of my feet. Don't eat anything else. When they force you to eat me, cut a strip from the bottom of my foot. There will not be poison there. So Crozier cuts a strip from the bottom of his foot because they force him to, and he eats the piece, and then Hickey and everybody eat Mr. Goodsir's body, and it poisons them all.
Also,
good job, Dr. Goodsir.
What meat was left on their feet after walking so far?
I know. I was like, ew, God, the bottom of his feet. Maybe I would just take the poison.
He describes looking at the body of Lieutenant Hodgson after they all get captured by Hickey, and then Hickey starts killing them one by one. And Hodgson's laying there, and he's like a skeleton.
Yeah,
and his bones are poking out of his. And I'm just like, what is there to eat at this point?
Well, and
a vein.
Yeah, like at a certain point. So usually fresh meat cures scurvy because a lot of animals can process vitamin C in a way that we can't. So like if you eat somebody who has scurvy, there's no vitamin C in their body. So like it's not getting you any... I mean, it'll keep you alive with protein and carbohydrates. Well, maybe not even carbs, but like...
But it's not going to help your
It's not going to help you scurvy. And like what's funny is that once you get scurvy, like it takes like one glass of orange juice, you start feeling better. Like it's amazing how quickly it works. Like we talked about before, your teeth jump back into your mouth. I remember that. I remember that from In the Heart of the Sea, where they were eating their comrades, and it wasn't really helping because they didn't have the necessary nutrients to use the energy. Yeah, I mean,
they were consuming.
And what's so funny is that at this point in the 1840s, they knew that lemon juice was anti-scorbutic, but they didn't know why. Like they didn't know those vitamin C, so like they didn't know that like when they would finally get like a seal, it's because the seals could have vitamin C in their body, and like that's why they would get better. But like they just because there wasn't that much science, so yeah. Oh,
I like how Dr. Goodsir keeps saying that there's probably some unseen animalcule.
Animalcule
in the cans that's killing them.
I wanted to mention a science thing that I thought was interesting. So when he's with Lady Silence and the igloo, which reading that is fascinating because like it's just so much warmer than like being in a drafty boat.
I have all kinds of thoughts about this.
Oh, I know, it's amazing. But so I was wondering how they could drink water from melted snow because like that's frozen seawater. I was like, isn't that salty? But I found something on Wikipedia. Ocean water freezes just like fresh water, which I did not know, which is a silly thing that I did not know. But at lower temperatures, fresh water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, but seawater freezes at about 28.4 because of the salt in it. When seawater freezes, however, the ice contains very little salt because only the water part freezes. It can be melted down to use as drinking water. I was like,
where does the salt go?
To know. So
I don't know.
If we get,
we need a science friend to tell us.
If we get icebound, now we know we can melt snow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, but I was confused by why salt water would freeze anyway, but now I know that it does. So
the whole y'all, these men went up to the Arctic of our planet and tried to manhaul whale boats across a frozen tundra on wooden sledges filled with Bibles and a stove and like wool clothes. I mean, how come not a single person at this time thought to themselves, how did the Inuits do it? And is there something there we could emulate rather than say
racism?
I mean, it is the level of xenophobia is just mind-blowing. Like repeatedly going to these places, failing, losing men to freezing temperatures, obviously being really uncomfortable in your slops and your Welsh wig, and like not one time, and killing these polar bears, and not one time thinking to yourself, maybe I could use some of this.
There's a better way.
I think part of the appeal of books like this is it's like colonialism revenge porn.
Yes, it definitely is.
like this is what we deserve. You know, like
100%.
This cold
100%.
and this scurvy and this being ripped apart by a vengeance demon is no less than we deserve for our hubris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I think about, you know, so the show starts off with like, and because it's based in real life, 20, 30 years after the events went down, like Inuit peoples remembered what happened, and they retained some of the story like in their oral legends. So like people 20 years later were like, oh yeah, these white dudes came, they lived in their house with the 3 sticks for 3 years, and then they all died. Like I just wonder what it would have been like to like watch these men just like suffer and just die.
Man, get the popcorn out and just be like, what are they gonna do now? Do you think they're gonna eat each other? Let's bet on who's gonna go first.
Yeah. No, I mean it's just wild to think that like they like if somebody came to my street like woefully unprepared and I was just like
Well, that's a different idea.
yeah, like you don't have to do that.
And didn't bother to ask for help or anything.
Why are you wearing a
like,
tracksuit in July? like
Or like was very, very rude and hostile and maybe even violent toward
Killed
you.
my father.
And then was also like, but why are you helping me?
yeah, like could you please give us food? I'm sorry if we kill you. Like
I just realized my feminist favorite might be that Lady Silence sat in that boat for years on end and didn't help a single one of them.
it was probably a little warmer. Yeah.
I was thinking like she's supposed to be the Tunbach wrangler. She's not a very good Tunbach wrangler,
She's
but
not wrangling anything.
maybe she was wrangling him exactly as he needed to be wrangled because he didn't kill Crozier, whose genetic material she needed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody else is like dog treats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't kill Mr. Goodsir, and Mr. Goodsir was kind to her.
Oh yeah.
That's true.
And it didn't kill Irving, and Irving was kind
That's
to
right.
her.
If a
That's
little
right.
creepy, but yeah.
Yeah, creep for sure.
But I guess he never put his hands on
He
her.
didn't, and he made every effort within his pathetic, limited young soldier powers to be respectful and kind
Yeah.
to her.
But then he entrapped her. He went down there with
Oh,
his peach
yeah.
marmalade and his silk scarf,
Yep.
and he knew that he was going there to specifically make her like these things.
Mhm.
And then when he gave her the things and she liked them, he was like, all women are the same. Irving,
Oh yeah,
sir.
he sucks, but he was nice to her.
He could be worse.
He
yeah.
was.
Yeah, and his
She did
concern
like
for
the
her
stuff.
was genuine, which presumably she was aware of. That like, yes, he had the hots for her, but also he wanted her to be safe. He wanted her to be okay. Oh, he could have been worse, as is often the bar. He could have been worse. And I mean, like Crozier, I did a word search for bitch. Crozier thought of her as a bitch like half a dozen times.
Oh yeah. I actually
Until
wrote
she actually saves his life. And then he's like,
Yeah.
okay.
this is part of my misogynist moment, but so he uses the slur Eskimo, but then it's followed by bitch, witch, wench, woman, girl, guest. Like it gets a little bit better as the book goes on.
He's the fucking worst, man.
He kind of is.
My misogynist moment is him and her. I'll save it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we could get to. We just kind of briefly touched on feminist fave, but
Can I
Oh,
do
yeah.
one thing real quick?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I kept a list of all the ways that penises were described.
Oh,
So we're going to have a penis parade.
penis,
So any fleshy appendage.
fleshy like a finger.
Well, they were basically, he was talking about like any fleshy appendage will freeze right off out here. And what was meant was a penis.
Yeah.
So any fleshy appendage, the exposed member will snap off in the cold.
Dongle.
Lower regions. Prick. Crozier's prick went from parade rest to full mast in 2 seconds.
Aye, Captain.
This is so much. Oh, everybody take a breath. Crozier's throbbing erection would not go away. It persisted in rising rigid to his navel
Ooh.
and pitching
Crozier?
back and forth there like a windshield wiper. The glands. Dan Simmons, don't say glands to me.
The sexiest word.
The glands as red as a signal lantern and extended several taut inches free of its foreskin. Then at one point he describes his penis while he's watching Sophia Craycroft swim as his prick rampant.
Oh, I remember that, and it was like
That
an
was actually
italics.
pretty, I thought that was pretty good.
And then
It's like a knight errant, a prick rampant.
Irving gets a boner when this is very weird.
Oh, this is my favorite one.
When he sees the Tunbach playing Lady Silence like a clarinet, he gets a boner, and it says he was suffering a powerful and permanent erection. And then a few sentences later, now detumescing burning erection.
Oh, detumescing. That's so sexy the way he writes.
And then
What did he say? That was during his sexually excited horror. when this memorable phrase is written in the book, the orgiastic bass hootings and erotic bagpipe flute notes were emanating from the woman.
An orgiastic bagpipe gives me a boner every time.
My orgiastic bagpipe.
Okay, girl.
So then I liked during the carnival, somebody was in a costume that included a Priapic cone. So they made a big paper mache boner they were wearing.
I love that boner jokes transcend centuries.
I think there are more dicks in this book than boobs.
I was actually just thinking that while you were reading this, although I do have a whole list of how we talk about breasts in this book, too, and there's a lot. So
this makes sense. I mean, I think dicks probably outweigh breasts, but there's so many more male characters than there are female characters.
Not literally, Haley.
Wait, what?
That's true. There are like 200 and some men and 4 or 5 women ever mentioned by name.
Yeah, like there's 2 women in Europe mentioned. There's 2 Native women mentioned by name, and then the rest are like nameless sex workers on different continents.
Oh, wait, I have one more thing.
Yeah.
I thought it would be fun to play tag yourself on the boat. I am pretty sure that I am Bridgens.
Oh, Bridgens. Reading all those
he
books.
wants to do is read and write in code to his BFF and not die. He didn't die anyway. And he dies with his nice little comb.
I know. They're so gentle.
Little Bridgens. So tag yourself. Who are you on the boat?
I'm probably Mr. Diggle, the most popular man on the ship. The cook.
Yeah, cook. Oh, and then he dies that horrible death when he has to get his foot cut off.
I know.
Oh, God. They all start getting gangrene, and they're just like, we're not going to be able to walk him anymore. Ugh.
Poor Mr. Diggle.
Oh, I also wanted to tag myself as Mr. Diggle.
Oh, it's okay. You can do it.
You can be the other cook. There's another cook.
I don't want to be the sous chef.
No, there's 2 cooks on each boat.
Well, we don't even know who he is.
That's true.
Mr. Weeks?
I liked how
I feel like you'd be Mr. Blanky.
They
You'd like
said-
looking at the ice.
Yeah.
I am so flattered by that. I wanted to say Mr. Blanky, but I thought it was like patting myself on the back too much.
No,
So
you're like always looking for danger.
I
Yeah,
can see that.
I am looking for danger.
He's taking care of people.
Yeah.
And he's like, even though he couldn't pull, he was always helping out. and,
I
like,
was
taking care of
thinking
people.
about though, like Mr. Blanky has to have such good eyesight, and my eyesight is horrible.
That is
but
true.
if it's just a personality,
true.
if it's personality traits, I accept Mr. Blanky.
yes.
I'm either Bridgens or Pegler, I guess. No,
He's
probably
reliable. Yes, he's good.
Kind of old.
Yeah.
They like to read. They like to study nonfiction.
Yeah.
They
That's
were
all.
such
Tag
nice
yourself.
characters. I wish I got to spend more time
If I
with them.
wasn't Diggle, I like Mr. DeVoe. He was like he was a brave seaman.
Yeah, he seems stalwart.
He's like, we have to go do the thing. Like, I'm going to build this cairn. I'm going to leave a note. Yeah.
Oh, poor
Yeah.
Graham Gore. He seemed like
Poor
a
Graham
good one.
Gore. He's the hottie, and he's the historical hottie, and he gets killed.
Some
Like
people
first.
in Goodreads, and I get it. If you don't like a book, you don't like a book. But some people's criticism was like, all the characters are wooden. And I was like, there's so many cool characters in this. I mean, granted, there's too many, but like,
I don't think that's my complaint.
yeah.
I don't.
I mean,
think the
there's
characters
lots
are
of other valid complaints, but I think that one is a little bit like not as valid. So
I think he does a good job. Like when he's not putting historical facts into people's mouths, like he does a pretty good job with dialogue. Like I was thinking
Yeah.
there's that one time when Mr. Golding, I think.
yeah, because Goldner
think
was the
that's
guy
who it
who did the cans. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was Golding. He's secretly with Hickey, but he sticks around and then he comes back, takes Crozier and Mr. Goods are on the ice. And like the whole scene where he comes off the ice, tries to get them to come with him for their, ambush. Like that whole conversation is really well done because that character has a very specific way of talking and a very specific personality that you can
Yeah.
tell. Like when you see it against Crozier, it's really good. I don't know. I thought he did a good job with that. I think he does a good job. with
Yeah,
characters.
Yeah, I think with the characters he's invested in, he does.
For sure.
But he has so many that
It's
it
hard,
would be
yeah.
impossible. And he
So he
definitely,
just keeps listing them.
yeah, he has a lot of red shirts.
I would read.
Oh man, he does.
Yeah, I would read a serialized version of like a short story from every character, just like literally every
that would be
character.
good.
I would read that.
That would be good.
Okay, feminist favorite. I think the only one really can be is I think towards the end, where Crozier, bedridden, watches Lady Silence basically just be a badass on the ice, catching fish, building an igloo, just generally knowing how to survive so much better than all 100 plus men on the Franklin expedition. My second one would be maybe Sophia being like, "Nah, I ain't gonna marry you."
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Gambit.
I would maybe marry an admiral. I would never marry a commander.
Right.
Like, what a bitch. I love her.
There's also like there's some feminist favorite sort of glance like drive-bys. Like I like Lady Franklin, James Franklin's wife.
The
turns out to
indomitable.
be kind of-
Yes.
yeah, she turns out to be kind of a badass eventually, you know. And so since Crozier goes through his like I can see the future while he's detoxing off whiskey. He sees what she does, and basically she's the only reason why you know, Captain Franklin's name doesn't go down and just ignite, you know, just
Yeah.
So she's kind of a badass. And then Crozier's grandma is also kind of a sweet
Moira.
I was into her. Like she's kind of a witch. She's Catholic. She's I was into her.
Memo Moira.
Emma Mora. Anything else, Lori? Did we miss any?
I don't have any. I just said no.
Yeah, I mean, this...
Yeah.
You know what I did like? So when we talked about how the men use like these really cumbersome sledges made of huge, heavy boats, but at one point on their first trip after he gets better, when she rescues him, she builds a sledge and like the fish are runners. Or, like, she like wraps the fish in ice and like it's just like the smartest. Like, wow, of course, why
It's
not?
so
Like,
good.
Yeah, and they spend so much time trying to clear ice off of the runners of their sledges. I mean, it's just woof. The
Had
iron-
everything
Like, leave
backwards.
it on.
So while I, like we said before, I think that he leans too hard into the racism and the xenophobia, and yet in many ways he does an effective job setting up the irony of like their judgment versus like what actually works. And it actually reminded me of what happened on the Essex when the whale ship Essex sank and they were on their little lifeboats for months and months or however long they were. They steered away from an inhabited island because they had heard that there were cannibals there. And then they ended up fucking shooting and eating each other. And I kept thinking about that when I was reading this. And I was like, you guys are creating every single problem that you're afraid of, or that like everything that you think is like very savage about these other people is the answer to your problem.
Yep.
To his credit, like the women, so there's the obvious male gaze issues in this book. A lot of the women that are in this book actually are kind of cool and have agency, and like they like
Some do.
he does all right by them, you know, except for some of the issues.
Yeah, like if he had just depicted the women as they were instead of like putting in like the 19th century racist thoughts, which that's us being very generous to him. But
you don't have to have that.
you don't have to have that. Or at least you don't have to have as much. Like I could see it maybe setting the scene 500 pages in, like, wow, these guys were really fucking dickheads. But like, you can't lead with it like that. Ugh.
Which brings us to misogynist moment.
So I put almost every single interaction with any woman mentioned in the book through by
I was
name.
like, how to choose? How do you choose? Yeah.
And I think we've definitely covered a lot of it. Like, I mean, because it's such a big part of the fabric of this book. So
I mean, not a single woman, not a single female character in the book is not evaluated on her looks.
Yeah.
Not a single one. No matter how glancing they appear. And we get the pubic hair of Franklin's
nest.
wives.
yeah,
He calls it a nest.
Like, I mean, there's not a single woman introduced that we do not evaluate in some way. It's just
yeah. And
infuriating.
I mean, I think I would rather have no women in a book than women objectified.
Like Amy said about Ringworld, just don't have a woman.
yeah, exactly. Like
Just don't have them.
I have a friend
You
who
don't like them.
I have a friend who was complaining about Our Flag Means Death because she's like, it's just a bunch of men. And I was like, that is true, but like, there's also a lot of queer characters, and like, at least the women characters aren't mistreated. I don't know. It could be worse.
I don't mind it. It's, to me, it's not a misogynist show at all. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
Nope, not at all.
Not
in
at
fact,
all.
the wife of Steve Bonnet is great. She's a great character.
Leslie Jones is a cool pirate, but I guess
yeah.
some people just want to see like a strong female character and everything, which I mean, in a perfect world, maybe, but sometimes I can watch a book about boatmen and I'm fine with it.
I am A-okay with a show where a group of men treat each other with care and open communication, and
Yes.
I'm okay with
yeah.
that.
No, same.
These men are learning how to not be victims of their own toxic masculinity, and
know.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, same. I tried my best to convince her, but no dice. So
Yeah, and the romance between the man and the Oh, well, the foot touch. Oh my gosh. But yeah, and then there's a non-binary character,
Yeah.
and it's like completely not a big deal. Like, it's not a topic on the show. There's just simply a non-binary character, which is like, that's great.
Yeah. No.
So I've basically no complaints about that show. And the foot touch.
That's so good.
And when they,
do you remember when that Swede gets scurvy?
oh yeah, well, I
And
saw.
he saves his teeth to put back.
They're gonna put back in.
As soon as he gets some OJ, he can just stick him back in.
I saw a really cute TikTok from a Gen Z kid that was like, I love this show, and I downloaded the song thinking it was a new band, and they downloaded Fleetwood Mac The Chain, and they'd never heard Fleetwood Mac, and they're just like, they thought it was some new indie band, and they're like, no, the song's from like 1976.
They're going to be so excited that there's so much music to
There's
listen
so
to.
much Fleetwood Mac. But it made me happy because I was like, that song, I remember the first time I heard it in college, when that bass solo comes in, you're like, The Chain is a fucking good song.
Yeah, I was like, how to choose. I think that Silence literally not having a tongue is up there. The fact that they do a virginity check on her is up there. Describing Inuit women as animals. But I think the part that wins for me is when Irving meets the little band of Inuits and he's like, great, we're safe. And we can't have that interaction without one of the male Inuits being like, no, look at my wife's breast. They're like literally just pulls her shirt up so that they can see her boobs. Like, is that really necessary? Like,
Yeah.
for some reason, that to me was just like so gratuitous and so ridiculous that it was sort of personified the whole problem. But
It's also a real choice by Dan Simmons to have the Inuit character like physically debasing his wife.
And they mentioned it several times.
oh, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They mentioned that in the beginning too. They're like, Native people don't value sex the way we do. Like, they'll like daughters will be like traded by the husbands. Like, is that true, or is that like an urban legend among English sailors? I mean, Lord knows that none of these men seem to have like very functional sexual relationships with anybody. Like, so it's like, who are Englishmen to judge another culture's sexual mores? So,
Crozier's built his whole identity around one hand job in a pond.
yeah.
Okay. The one that was maybe most upsetting to me is that after Crozier's kind of had his redemption arc, as it were, in the last weird novelette at the end of the book, he thinks about his future and is he going to become a Tunbach Wrangler? And he thinks he could move to the U.S. and take her with him, knowing that she would not be able to speak to anyone and that she would die either of illness or sadness or both. And then he would get an American wife to raise his kids. And I thought, first of all, like, I don't like this train of thought. But also he was like, he knew that she would if he asked her to. And I thought the whole point of this was to add his like genetic propensity toward having Tunbach shining to their family. So like it would defeat the entire purpose of everything she has done for years if she went with him and took her kids with him, and then she just died. And I was like, why does he think she would do that? I don't think she would do that.
No.
And to me, I was like, you guys literally live inside each other's heads, and you think that she would go shrivel up and die and send her kids away to be raised by some white lady in the U.S. Like, she's not going to do that. So even after everything that's happened, I don't think he knows his wife, even though they literally share their mind. And it bothered me. So, not just that he had those thoughts, but that he thought she would go for it. Yeah. I was like, you don't know this lady. You don't know her.
No.
I am glad we have a married woman on this podcast because that is such a good point, and it never would have occurred to me.
Oh, yeah, Sam.
Yeah, that is such a good point. But it also doesn't speak well of men that they would know their wives so like.
Well, but that's what happened back then.
Doing that on purpose or not, like showing that men don't know their wives. I don't know.
I mean, I think marriage was very different 200 years ago, especially when, like, you know, women died in childbirth all the time. Like, most men had several wives. I think you would have to. Like, who else would raise the kids and cook?
Well, and I think that we're supposed to think highly of him that he knows that she would do this and that he chooses not to go forward with it.
I think that's right. I
think we're supposed to be like, oh, what a good guy. He's choosing the harder path for himself, which is having his tongue eaten by a polar bear, which I wouldn't do. Yeah, I wouldn't do it. But like his whole thought process of like, I know she would go with me knowing she would die and our kids would be raised in like Connecticut or whatever. No, sir, I don't think she would. And I can't believe that you think that she would.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
I mean, but like this, again, this is a man who has not had much experience with, like, he's probably never had a relationship with a woman.
No, just his imaginary the imaginary marriage he was going to have after he got a handy in a pond.
But who amongst us hasn't imagined a whole marriage with someone we just met? I have.
I mean, I don't fault him for his imagination, but boy, he held on to it for a long time.
Yeah.
Sure did. Bless. He sure did.
All right. Boob talk. I counted. Breasts are mentioned 28 times.
I made a little list of like some of the descriptors we get. We get wet breasts, big breasts, plump breasts. We also get moon silvered breasts, which I think was my
Coconut
favorite.
breasts, lemon breasts, boob scampi.
Cocktail breasts. Breast cocktail.
We got all the kind of breasts you want over here.
And don't forget the bobbling breast.
Yeah. Oh, my favorite though is this, and this reminds me of the one from Hyperion. The breasts already heavy as globed fruit, but those of an adolescent, the nipples not yet raised, the areola strange.
Yeah.
What does the nipples not yet raised mean?
Is that like how balls drop? Did your nipples raise when you were 12? Like what?
Not to my knowledge.
How are they heavy as globed fruit, but also like adolescent looking?
Yeah, you don't get globe fruit boobs until you're at least 30.
But also like globe fruit is like a grapefruit. A pomegranate? This is very Belinda. It's very
I said that to Kevin. Oh, because I got the audiobook and I was listening to it in the car, and I told Kevin that some of the scenes really sounded like I was listening to My Dad Wrote a Porno.
100%. Yeah. Like anytime the breasts are mentioned, it's 100%. Have you seen a boob? Have you touched the boob?
Oh my God.
Bags of sand.
The part during the hand job and she's humping his leg and Crozier thinks, how can anything be wetter than water?
Yeah.
So I heard a British man read that out loud on the audiobook, and I was like, oh, it's Rocky Flintstone. It's giving Rocky Flintstone. It's giving Belinda Blinked.
I think that my favorite boob talk in this whole book, though, was when a man in the actual throes of delirium tremens, he's going through alcohol withdrawal. He is maybe gonna die. You don't know.
He's taking the cure.
And he's having these visions of Margaret Fox of the Fox sisters all the way over there in America. And he takes a moment to say that her eyes were her best feature now that he couldn't see her plump breasts because they were covered by the sheet.
Oh no. There's another one when he's in part of the community of Inuit people that he's like assimilated into. He meets an Indian woman with large breasts, and she tells her his name, and he's like, I bet $20 that name means like big boobs or something. Like that's like something from like Porky's. Like that is ridiculous. Like this man is obsessed with breasts in a very weird way.
They're also always very alarmed when they see a brown nipple. They're like, oh no, but nipples are pink. I'm like, you've seen a brown person.
Yeah, like
so why are you like alarmed at a brown nipple? But then like later Crozier talks about like Sophia Craycroft has pink nipples at the center of the white globes of her breasts, but then he compares them to they're unlike the dark nipples of all the sex workers that he's met at the dockside or whatever. And I just don't like pick a position. Have you seen a brown nipple ever in your life, or have you not? Like
yeah, and like
it's just so stupid.
To be continuously shocked by breasts is like he's like Lucille Bluth and Jean Parmesan. Like
It's like boobs keep sneaking up on him.
I really would like. I mean, like, do men? No, that's a dumb question.
I think every man is different, but like at a certain point, you think you'd be like, I know a boob.
Are they this preoccupied all the time with boobs?
I don't know.
Like, is every boob you see like brand new?
How do
like,
you get anything
that
done?
one. I mean, I guess when I go for a walk and I see a dog, I'm like very excited every time I see a dog. So I'm like, look at that one, it's so cute, and that one's so cute, and that one's fluffy, and that one's tall.
But
maybe it's like that.
Similar.
But at a certain point, you'd be like, I've seen a brown dog. I understand.
Yeah, I'm not
like
shocked.
you're not gonna be shocked by its very brownness.
I do. I really like it, but I am like, I know that that's a dog. It looks like a dog.
I like that dog.
Has the general standard dog configuration. Oh,
I'm not sure you would continually note that they bobble.
The thing I like about the globed fruit breast I was like, what fruit isn't globed? And I thought of a banana. So it's like, it's not a banana boob. They're not banana breasts, or if you want to be pedantic, like a cucumber is technically a fruit. They're not cucumber boobs.
A kiwi fruit
no
boob.
shame. If you got a banana boob or a cucumber boob, no.
That's true. That's
shame.
fine.
No shame.
Banana boobs come for us all.
That's
right.
true.
Eventually, we will all have elongated banana boobs. And then we will not have the sexy baby boobs that they like so much in.
Well, then you got to get into a
novels.
pond so they kind of float. It'll be fine.
As long as they're bubbling on the surface.
Yeah, you got to
And
bubble.
then Dan Simmons will be like, from the shape of her banana breasts, I could not tell if she was ever beautiful. Perhaps decades in the past, but not today.
Today
I
is
tried
not
to
that.
close my eyes and imagine a time when she was hot.
No, that's the only thing that matters. All right. My favorite section of probably this episode is the fantastical food. I wrote, where to start? Ooh.
I know. Woo.
First off, I want to preface this by saying I highly recommend, if you're at all interested in what people ate on boats, there's a book called Feeding Nelson's Navy, The True Story of Food at Sea in the Georgian Era by Janet MacDonald. And like, if you want to know how they sourced the salt pork, how hot the ovens were that baked the hardtack, she'll tell you, and it's fascinating. Well, maybe it's not fascinating, but I loved it. And if you're really into
I
it,
would think it was interesting.
no,
yeah.
it is a deep dive into like how they supplied the navies with all these victuals, as it were. Okay. What do we have? We have hardtack. We've got salt pork. We've got the canned foods. We got the rum ration. We got Crozier's whiskey. And
We got
always
seal. We got blubber.
we got blubber. We got the lemon juice. I still think
we
it's
got
fascinating.
muck sauce steaks at one point.
Oh yeah, those sound good. But I think it's fascinating. So Crozier's obviously an alcoholic, and once he's done with his ration of whiskey, he's like, I'd rather die than drink gin. So he just gets sober. It's fascinating.
I was interested in the bad liver of the white bear. I didn't know that you could not eat a polar bear liver.
That's true.
That was That was interesting to me.
I wonder what is in it that makes it poisonous.
I looked it up and I don't remember.
I think overall, food is so important in this book, and I agree that it is repetitive how much he talks about it, but like, it's the lack of food that causes the two main causes of death: starvation and scurvy. And like,
Yeah.
I just recently read, because of Amy, I read the book about the Donner Party. What was it called?
It's called The Indifferent Stars Above.
The Indifferent Stars Above. And I was in a weird place for a week while I read it, but like, thinking about food, because I mean, again, like, food is one of my favorite things to think about and read about, and like, this book talks about it a lot in ways that I think is super fascinating. So.
Well, nothing makes me more aware of the food that I eat than reading these books about people who are going through a situation with absolutely no food. And let's not forget the most important food in this book, which is people.
Yeah, that's true. I just think about pulling these hundreds of pound sledges on 400 calories a day. Like, if I skip lunch, I don't feel good. Like, I just don't understand how they did it for so long.
It's important to note for the listener out there that Haley made pea soup and hardtack for Lori, Kevin, and I in honor
Monogrammed
of
hardtack.
Monogrammed hardtack.
When I really love people, I'll make you monogrammed hardtack.
It was very good.
I ate my hardtack with my pea soup. I'm not going to get scurvy now. I'm pretty sure peas have vitamin C in them, right?
Oh yeah, I think so.
So we're good.
Yeah, no. So like, again, very repetitive how he mentions the food so much, but I think it's, I don't know, it's just they didn't eat anything for so long.
My favorite food stuff is that they took almost 10,000 pounds of chocolate.
And they didn't eat it.
How do these boats hold so much?
I know. I have a very hard time picturing the scope
How do they
of these
float?
ships.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, so one man, like on a good day when life was good on these boats, like the average ration, and the book will tell you how much they eat every day. Like the allotment would be like these many like a pound of hardtack, which a pound of hardtack is a lot.
No pooping.
No, yeah, it's like,
I would never need to go to the seat of ease.
Oh, but they were pooping right over the side of the boat. I was just mortified.
I was thinking about like when they were camping, like you just have to like at certain points when it's negative 80 degrees, you'd have to bare your ass and poop, like the worst poop of your life.
I bet they were pooping in their pants a lot.
Oh, think about how stinky it was. Oh,
What if your balls like brushed against the ice while you were hunkered down? Ugh.
yeah. No, but yeah. So,
Bye, balls.
so you'd get like your pound of your hardtack. You'd get like a pound of salt pork and like. Think about how boring. Although the book does explain that like a lot of sailors ate better than people on land, because if you were poor, like you weren't guaranteed a pound of anything a day. So imagine looking forward to it.
Yeah, sometimes I think about like what I said earlier about like the hubris of even doing this, but for a lot of just the sailors, it was just like a way to have a bed and a roof and something to eat.
Yeah, even if you didn't, like, even at the end of the journey, you ended up owing the ship money because you had to buy new clothes. Like, you still got to live somewhere for 4 years.
Well, and it's like what Ishmael says. He's like a person on a ship basically breaks even or gets paid to live. So
Yeah.
he's like, why wouldn't I go be on a ship? That was like his way of thrifty living.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Dan Simmons made a point of telling us at one point that the advance they got against their salary could go to their family while they were out on the
which is
on
good
boats.
because otherwise they could drink.
Their family would get this money and then they could take off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the food is one of the places where, as repetitive as it is, I think it's one of the places where Dan kind of thrives in this book. That's sort of this good Venn diagram of Peak Dan and things we're interested in is the food.
Yeah, and like
So like,
think about like the food is the only bright spot in these people's days. Like even when they're like near death towards the end, like they would still stop and make camp and like I got my biscuit, like my 1-inch biscuit and my bite of pork.
every time they described the biscuits as green, it made my stomach turn.
Oh yeah, no.
Or
By the
filled
end,
with weevils.
by the end,
Well,
the
protein.
biscuit was not good because like at a certain point in this book, everything just gets wet and stays wet for the rest of their lives.
Oof.
Like nothing dries out. So
Ugh. Ah, if only they had learned to make an igloo.
if only. All right, I have a wonderful soap stuff sentence.
Do it.
Oh,
So you could call this book, or describe this book thusly. 2 gay lovers plot a mutiny and become cannibals in the frozen tundras of the Arctic, killing and eating their former bosses.
yay!
It's pretty soapy.
That's pretty
That would be
good.
like in the TV guide summary.
Yes.
So mine was like 800 pages in. And by the way, Captain Crozier has The Shining.
Right.
The shinning.
You've known Captain Crozier for 4 years. And we're just now telling you. By the way, he's a psychic, which reminds me of how
He's an
angry my grandmother was during the season of Days of Our Lives when Dr. Marlene Evans was possessed by a demon. And my grandmother announced to anyone who would listen that she was never watching the show again. And then she proceeded to watch it every day for the rest of her life. But it was kind of like that. It's like, well, you're just a normal person. And then suddenly you're possessed by a demon. You have The Shining. Now you have The Shining and you're a demon wrangler. Okay.
I wonder if it's because he finally got sober and could think clearly, and the shining could come out.
Oh.
But it is very
maybe.
soapy. Yeah.
That's a good point because he does start seeing the future during his alcohol withdrawal.
Yeah, like he gets the shining when he
That's
starts
true.
detoxing, and he's like, woo.
It was such an interesting little device to get us off the ship for a little while and let us know what the world was thinking about the Franklin expedition. So in that respect, I didn't hate it.
Yeah.
And yet I was still like, really? Okay.
This was the most Peak Dan moment to me because it was like he went and researched everything that ever happened.
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
Franklin
yeah.
expedition. He's like, well, now I don't get to tell him unless I have.
How can I prove it?
And it's funny because he'll drop a random shipmate, like suddenly we meet Pegler, and I'm glad we met Pegler. I really like him. But like very abruptly, we're like, and here's this guy, and here's his story. And so there's really no reason he couldn't have been like a Lady Jane Franklin chapter, and she would be like, here are all the people I'm paying. Yeah, yeah. But instead, we get The Shining.
Yep. Arctic shining.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, those were mine.
Yeah. All right. Did you like this book?
Yes, but less so.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
I'm no longer in raptures about it, but
I
still
do.
good.
I definitely still love this book, and I still think it's fascinating, but it is deeply problematic for a book written in 2007.
I just, like I said, I think he's so good at the tension building and the suspense. And when I didn't have that, then all the flaws were much more toward the forefront.
This is like my friend's grandmother who never saw a movie more than once because like they wanted to keep that initial like and there's something to be said for that, I think.
Totally.
So,
yeah, I can see that one both ways because I like to revisit things because you get new things out of them every time.
True. And like,
yeah.
And I think it's different whether like it's objectively good or like nice too.
Objectively good.
I think some things really reward a reread or a rewatch, and I'm not necessarily sure that this one does.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like hate reading it, but it was not the adventure that it was the first time.
The tension is important. So once you know what happens,
that's true.
It loses something.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like watching The Sixth Sense is never the same after you see it.
And when I first read this too, I didn't know the historical events, so I also didn't know everybody was going to die. So like I was devastated when poor Pegler died. I was devastated when Mr. Goodsir died.
Mr.
Like all of those.
Blanky.
Mr. Blanky, I
Mr. Blanky, when he puts his pipe in his mouth.
He just walks away.
Oh, but I love
throws
Mr.
his
Blanky where he's
thing
like,
at the
I'm
bear.
going out on my own terms. He's like, I got my pipe. He's like, come on, fucker. I'm ready for you. And I loved his
Good
like
way.
weird serenity.
Yeah.
Like his like death drive kicked in, I guess, is what it is.
Yep.
And he was just like, I'm ready for whatever comes.
That would have been me the first time they get frozen in. And they'd be like, Haley, there's still 3 years of food. I'm like, nope, this is it.
Because you get real warm before you freeze to death. So I'm going to go outside and get cozy in the snow. Yeah. So, yeah, I still liked it, but not as much.
Yeah.
And I will probably not jump up and down recommending it to people. I would probably be more likely to recommend it with caveats like many a content warning will go in this one.
That makes sense. I think
I'm going to recommend Frozen in Time
Yeah.
by Owen Beatty and John Geiger. It's great.
Is this Star Wars or Lord of the Rings? I have an answer.
I have an answer.
I think it is Star Wars because there's an ice planet, the Toonbach is a Wampa, and there's a mystical force involved that connects everything in the book.
I love it. Amy, go.
It's Star Trek because all Star Trek is, all space exploration is the search for the Northwest Passage. And so it's like you just load up these really expensive ass ships and send people into the unknown and then hope they don't die.
Yeah, that's true.
And sometimes they get eaten by scary monsters they didn't know about until they got there. That's Star Trek in a nutshell.
But the good thing about Star Trek is that they've got a pretty nice culture. Victorian England, not the nicest culture.
Yeah, that's true. They haven't solved all the world's ills in this one like they have.
I dig it.
Lori?
I'm not very good at this one, and I thought probably more like Lord of the Rings since they're like a ragtag group of people slogging along and being miserable. But I also see Star Wars if Crozier is Luke and The Shining is the Force.
I can see that.
So we got kind of a vote for one of each.
Yeah, it's a three-way split tie.
All right, that seems fitting.
It's so funny because I've been slowly transcribing the Dune episode while I've been load points at work, and that's right after Lori read it, and every third sentence is this reminds me of the Terror. It's so cute.
The only reason I think this was Star Trek to me is because I started watching Star Trek Strange New Worlds while I was reading this book, and I was like, space exploration is just like looking for the Northwest Passage.
By the way, Haley, remember my birthday the year after I read The Terror? You got me a biography of John Franklin. And I don't read nonfiction, and I actually read a lot of it.
Oh, no, that's great. Yeah, it was. There's a couple episodes of Hugo Girl where we're just and then this was The Terror. Because, so while this book definitely comes with trigger warnings and content warnings, it gets in you. Even if you don't like it, you think about it a lot. I was, even this week, I'd read it 4 years ago. I was still driving around and I'd be I would think about certain parts. I was oh man, I'd be so hungry if I hadn't eaten in 3 days.
Well, I've told you guys how I was listening to the Sea Shanty playlist on Spotify that I like. And then the song The Northwest Passage came on, which is apparently Canada's unofficial national anthem. But I'm listening, I'm just in the kitchen, living my life listening. And I hear the song going, to find the hand of Franklin reaching for the Beaufort Sea. I screamed. I was like, is this a song about the Franklin expedition? I looked it up and I was like, nobody told me.
I didn't even know about it, I don't think.
She got real mad at all of our Canadian listeners for not telling us.
And then they were all justifiably it would have been sort of mansplainy. They just couldn't fathom someone not knowing about it. So they're
you're married to a whole ass Canadian.
That's true.
Kevin did not know.
Kevin.
He did not know.
Yeah, sometimes when I'll start talking about the Franklin expedition with normies, and I'm just I gotta stop. Nobody cares. But they don't get it. They don't get it.
I feel
they don't get it.
If and when I need Canadian citizenship, instead of the exam, I'm going to ask if I can just sing the song perfectly.
May I sing the song of your people?
Yes. Look at me. I belong here. I also apologize all the time.
If you look up Franklin Expedition on TikTok, there's a really niche subset of people that are really into it. And I'm these are my people.
Oh, I saw somebody the other day reply to a Twitter thread. Somebody said something about the Terror, and then someone replied and was I love how Terror Twitter never sleeps.
Well, what was the one that was an NFT? It was not Franklin on the Terror or something.
Oh, no, I don't know.
There was some joke about that. Oh, several of my friends, excluding you two, because y'all know how much I love it, but I have friends that are they kind of know that I'm into the Franklin Expedition, and they'll send me random memes. And the fact that these memes even exist blow my mind.
I love it.
It's so niche.
coming up next time?
We're doing 2001, right?
Yes, book and film. Requested by our Twitter follower, Guilherme. So thanks for that.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah. The book is short and the movie is good.
Cool. All right. See y'all later.
Bye.
Bye. Don't get frostbite. But,
And the male gaze issues. No, you can cut that.
what?
The male gaze.
the male GAYS, because there's so many sodomites in this book.
It's a gaze pun. Happy Pride Month.
It's a homophone.